My fiancée humiliated me at her corporate party in front of 200 people mocking my electrician job, so I gave her ring back right there. And she never saw coming what happened next. I'm 30 years old. I'm an electrician. I have my own business. And 6 months ago, I ended a 4-year relationship in the most humiliating and public way you can imagine. Well, humiliating for her in the end, I guess. But in the moment, I felt like I was dying. The thing is, I need to tell this story because there are still people who think I overreacted, that I was too dramatic, and honestly, I've been asking myself for months if I did the right thing. But every time I think about it, every time I remember that night, I know I had no other choice. My name is Brandon, and I met Michelle when we were both 26, at one of those kind of fancy bars where I never went, but a friend insisted on celebrating his birthday there. She was with her friends, I was with mine, and we ended up talking at the bar because she spilled her drink on my shirt, like that cliché. She was cute, confident, worked in marketing for a mid-sized company, and I told her I had just started my own electrician business after working 5 years for another company. I remember she said something like, "Wow, that's so brave. I could never be my own boss." And in that moment it sounded genuine, you know? Like she was actually impressed. The first 2 years were good. I mean, normal, like any relationship. She lived in an apartment near downtown. I had a small house I bought with a loan from my parents in a neighborhood further out, but quiet. We'd see each other on weekends, sometimes during the week if I didn't have to work late, which was pretty often because when you have your own business, you basically work all the time. Michelle understood. Or at least that's what she said. Her friends were all from the corporate world, people who worked in offices and wore suits and talked about things like synergy and market analysis, and I always felt kind of out of place when we'd go out with them. But Michelle told me not to worry, that they liked me. I think the first signs started around a year and a half into dating. Nothing obvious, you know what I mean? But little comments that at the time didn't seem like a big deal, but looking back were clearly red flags. Like one time we were having dinner with her parents, well-off people who lived in one of those big houses in the suburbs, and her dad asked me about my business. I was telling him about a big contract I had just landed. Complete electrical installation in a new commercial building, like almost a 3-month project. And Michelle interrupted and said something like, "Oh yeah, Brandon's super busy fixing outlets and changing light bulbs," laughing like it was this adorable joke. Her dad laughed too, and I just sat there with my mouth open thinking, wait, what did I just hear? But I let it go because, I don't know, I guess I thought she was just trying to be funny. Michelle did that sometimes, turned everything into a joke, especially when she was nervous or trying to impress someone. Later that night I told her, "Hey, what you said at dinner made me feel kind of bad." And she apologized, said she didn't mean it that way, that she was just playing around. And I believed her because I wanted to believe her, basically. Things continued like that for a while longer. I was working like crazy, building my business. She was advancing in her career. We talked about getting married eventually, buying a house together, all those things couples plan. Around 3 years in, I proposed to her. Nothing super elaborate but meaningful. I took her to that same bar where we met and asked her to marry me. She said yes, cried, posted like 1,000 photos on Instagram of the ring, which cost me 3 months of income, but that's another story. And I thought, okay, this is real. We're doing this. But then she got a promotion. This was like a year and a half ago. They promoted her to senior marketing manager or something like that. I don't remember the exact title, but basically it meant more money, more responsibilities, and a lot more pressure to project a certain image. And that's when things really started to change. Michelle became obsessed with appearances, with what people thought, with fitting into this corporate world that had suddenly become her entire life. She started working late almost every day, going to networking events, constantly talking about her colleagues and her boss and office politics. And I tried to support her. I really did, because I understood it was important to her. But the comments about my work became more frequent and more hurtful. Like one time we were with her friends, and one of them mentioned that her husband had just made partner at a law firm, and Michelle said something like, "Oh, I'm so jealous. Brandon can barely take vacations because he has to be available for electrical emergencies, like making my job sound like I was some kind of emergency plumbing service or something. Or when my work truck broke down and I had to use the backup one that had my company logo big on it, she asked me not to park it in front of her apartment when I came to visit, because she didn't want the neighbors to think there was construction going on or something. Every time I tried to talk to her about this, Michelle would tell me I was too sensitive, that I was overreacting, that she was just joking. And I started to believe that maybe I was being too sensitive, because she always said it with a smile, always framed it as a joke. So how could I get angry without seeming like I had no sense of humor? The straw that broke the camel's back was her corporate holiday party. This was exactly 6 months ago, last December. Michelle had been talking about this party for weeks, saying it was super important because all the company executives would be there, including the CEO who almost never showed up at social events. She insisted I had to go, that she needed me to accompany her, that it would be weird if she went alone being one of the few engaged people on the team. I really didn't want to go because those kinds of corporate events bore me to death, but I agreed because, well, she was my fiancée and this was important to her. I bought a new suit for the occasion, nothing too expensive but decent. Got cleaned up nice, showed up on time to pick her up. The party was at a fancy hotel downtown, one of those with an event hall and everything. There were like 200 people there, everyone dressed elegantly, waiters with trays of champagne, a live band, you know the type of event. Michelle was nervous but excited. She introduced me to some of her colleagues, and at first everything seemed to be going well. But then I started to notice a pattern. Every time Michelle introduced me to someone, she made some condescending comment about my work. At first they were subtle things, like, "This is Brandon, my fiancé, he's an electrician, he has his own business," followed by a little laugh like it was something funny. Then it got worse. To a group of her colleagues, she said, "This is Brandon. If any of you ever blow a fuse, you know who to call." And everyone laughed like she had made the wittiest joke in the world. To another group, she said, "Brandon is very handy. He can fix anything." Followed by a wink that made me feel like I was her personal handyman and not her fiancé. I tried to smile and go along with it, but inside I was dying. Each introduction was a new stab. Each comment made me feel smaller. And the worst part is that she clearly thought this was acceptable, that she was being funny and charming. People laughed. Michelle glowed with the attention, and I just stood there feeling like a complete idiot. The moment that really ruined everything was when her boss, a super intimidating woman around 50 that Michelle obsessively admired, asked to make a toast. Everyone gathered in the center of the hall with their glasses. The boss gave a speech about the incredible year they'd had, thanked the team, all those typical corporate things. And then, I don't know how the hell it happened, but somehow Michelle ended up with the microphone. She was a bit tipsy at that point, not drunk but definitely cheerful. And she started making her own little speech about how grateful she was for the promotion, for the opportunity, for the incredible team. And then, I literally can't believe this happened. She said something like, "And I also want to thank my fiancé Brandon who's here tonight. He doesn't understand much about what I do, but he's really good at fixing things. So if anyone's dishwasher breaks or they need to change an outlet, he's your man." Followed by that laugh of hers that I had started to hate. The whole room laughed. Some took it as a cute joke. Others clearly thought it was kind of pretentious and weird. But everyone laughed. And I just stood there, feeling like she had slapped me in the face in front of 200 people. My first instinct was to run, literally, just leave, and never see her again. But something inside me said, "No, I'm not going to leave quietly, not after this." I waited for her to finish her speech, to return the microphone, and then I grabbed her arm and said, "We need to talk, now." She looked at me confused, still smiling from all the attention she'd received, and said, "Not now, Brandon. I'm in the middle of the party." And I said, "I don't care. We need to talk now or I'm leaving and not coming back." I think something in my voice or my face made her realize this was serious, because she stopped smiling and followed me out of the hall. We went out to one of those hotel corridors, mostly empty, except for a couple of people who passed by occasionally, and that's when I let her have it. I said, "What the hell was that, Michelle? Why did you humiliate me in front of all your colleagues? Why do you constantly make these comments about my work like it's something to be ashamed of?" And she, instead of apologizing, instead of understanding why I was angry, looked at me like I was the one acting irrationally. She said, "Oh, Brandon, it was just a joke. Why do you always have to take everything so seriously? People were having fun." I told her it wasn't a joke to me, that I had been putting up with her condescending comments for months, that she made me feel like she was ashamed to be with me. And that's when she finally showed her true feelings. She said, "Well, excuse me, Brandon, but the truth is your job isn't exactly glamorous. It's not like you're a doctor or lawyer or something. You're an electrician. You fix wires. And yeah, it's fine that you have your business, but it's not the kind of thing I brag about with my colleagues." Literally. Those were her words. Like that direct. I was silent for a moment, not because I didn't know what to say, but because I couldn't believe what I had just heard. This was the woman I was going to marry, the person I was supposedly going to spend the rest of my life with, and she had just told me that she was basically ashamed of me. So, I took the engagement ring out of my pocket, gave it to her, and said, "We're done. I'm not going to marry someone who doesn't respect me." She just stood there with her mouth open, the ring in her hand, looking at me like she couldn't process what had just happened. She started saying, "Wait, Brandon, don't be like this. You're overreacting. We can talk about this." But I was already walking back to the hall, not to stay at the party, but to get my coat that I had left at the coat check. Michelle followed me, now crying and trying to keep her voice down because we were back near the party, but I wasn't paying attention to her. I got my coat, started walking toward the exit, and she grabbed my arm and yelled at me, "You can't do this here. You can't humiliate me in front of all my colleagues." And that's when something in me just exploded. I turned around and said, "Humiliate you? Are you kidding? You just humiliated me in front of everyone 10 minutes ago and you didn't care? The difference is, I'm telling you the truth, that you're a shallow and condescending person who values appearances more than people." My voice was loud at that point, not yelling but definitely audible, and some people from the hall started looking toward us. Michelle got hysterical, started saying I was an asshole, that I had always been too sensitive, that she had made a mistake agreeing to marry me. Her boss came out of the hall at that moment, clearly concerned about the drama that was unfolding, and asked Michelle if everything was okay. Michelle, crying now, told her I was breaking off our engagement for no reason, that I was being irrational. I just turned around and left, walked out of the hotel, took an Uber home, and that was the last time I spoke to Michelle face to face. The following days were a nightmare. Michelle started posting on social media, her version of events, obviously omitting the part where she publicly humiliated me and painting me as the villain who dumped her for no reason at her work party. Her friends supported her, started sending me messages saying I was an idiot, that Michelle didn't deserve this, that I had ruined one of the most important moments of her career. I didn't respond to anything, just blocked everyone and tried to move on with my life. But then, like 2 weeks later, I got a message from someone I didn't expect. One of Michelle's work colleagues, a girl named Sarah, who I had met a couple of times at previous events. She said she needed to tell me something, that she felt bad for not saying it earlier. Basically, she revealed that Michelle had always talked about me condescendingly at the office, that she constantly made comments about how I didn't make as much money as her, about how my work was blue-collar and not up to her expectations, about how she felt she had compromised her standards by being with me. Sarah told me that several people at the office had felt that Michelle's comments at the party were inappropriate, but nobody said anything because, well, she was their manager. Reading that was simultaneously devastating and validating. Devastating because it meant that for years Michelle had been talking behind my back, laughing at me with her colleagues, presenting me as some kind of charity project. But validating because it confirmed that I wasn't crazy, that I wasn't overreacting, that everything I had felt was completely justified. Then, like a month later, Michelle's best friend, Jessica, someone I also had a decent relationship with, contacted me. She asked if we could talk in person. I was hesitant, but agreed, because I had always thought Jessica was genuine. We met at a coffee shop, and basically, she told me that Michelle had always thought I was too easy to manage, that I never confronted her, that she felt she had settled for me because I was stable but not exciting. Jessica told me she had tried to talk to Michelle about this several times, about how disrespectful she was being, but Michelle always justified it by saying that I knew she loved me despite everything, That conversation was what finally gave me the peace I needed to move forward. I realized I hadn't lost someone who loved me. I had escaped from someone who saw me as inferior, as convenient, as safe, but not good enough. I took a solo trip to the mountains, something I had wanted to do for years but never had time. I spent a week in a small cabin, hiking, reading, thinking about everything that had happened. And that's where I was finally able to process it all, where I could feel the full pain of the betrayal, but also the liberation of no longer being in a relationship where I had to constantly prove my worth. When I got back, I found out through mutual friends that Michelle had faced some consequences at work. Apparently, the public drama of our breakup hadn't been well received by the company, and when it came time to consider her for another promotion, they passed her over. I'm not going to lie. I felt a small satisfaction hearing that, not because I wanted things to go badly for her, but because I felt like the universe had found a way to balance things out. As for me, I've been better than ever, honestly. I expanded my business, hired 2 more employees, started teaching evening classes at the local community college for students who want to learn the trade. I reconnected with friends I had neglected during the relationship. Went back to doing things I liked, but that Michelle always thought were boring or unsophisticated. And most importantly, I stopped feeling like I had to apologize for what I do, for who I am. Last week, one of my former students sent me a message saying he had just gotten his first job as an apprentice electrician, that he was super grateful for everything I taught him. Reading that message, I realized that this impact I can have, this work I do with my hands, is worth more than any fancy corporate title or the approval of people who value appearances over substance. And that's enough for me.